Greetings, Neuro Ninjas. Hope you've had a good week. Andrew from Action Your Potential here. And this week's question of the week is, drumroll please. Brilliant question actually this week from a sixth form student about habits. They've been trying to develop a positive mindfulness habit and a positive exercise habit for 6 months, and they're cheesed off with themselves that they've not managed to do it. So let's dive in and explore how we commit to a new habit every single day to change our amazing brains. So thanks to that student for this brilliant question. Why is building a habit so hard? Well, it's really interesting because it's all to do with the way that we think we respond to situations and the way that we think we are. So why is everything easier said than done? And if you think about it, that phrase, someone might have said that to you at one point. Well, that's easier said than done. If you think about it, everything is easier said than done. Why is that? Well, basically, the reason for that is our brain, incredibly large connections, lots of networks. We've got this big global neural workspace is what neuroscientists call it. And that's where we can smash together different thoughts and ideas and come up with novelty and creativity. And it's really quick the way the brain can do that, process it and generate thoughts. The brain generates thoughts the entire time. In the same way that our body generates heat the entire time, our brain does thoughts all of the time. And they're kind of quick and fluid and they move around our heads as electrical impulses instantly. So we might have a thought, I want to change my exercise habit, I want to improve this, I want to develop this. And that's the easy bit. It's easier said than done, after all. So in this large global neural workspace, we can think a new thought as quickly as a finger click. But that fluidity cannot be turned into a behavior change without a daily action to change our brain. Because that quick flickering thought, action potential, zipping down neurons, we're going to need to build a path for a set of habits and build that structure into our brain. So understanding there's that kind of difference between those things. I think it helps to understand what we actually like, because the brain's conception of what we are isn't quite right. The brain builds the mind. Our mind is built by our brain every day. Remember, when we talk about the 12 rocks of well-being, we talk about sleep as a distinct mind state. As we're moving out of sleep and waking up, we experience sleep inertia. So we're a bit groggy in the morning. Our brain is connecting up circuits across our brain and generating that day's mind. Today's mind is a little bit different from yesterday's mind because we've learnt stuff, we've had emotional experiences. The brain builds the mind every day, and the mind is a model of the brain's operation. So it can basically understand what it's doing. It generates this neural global workspace where we can reflect on our experiences and say to ourselves things like, well, I want to develop an exercise habit. I want to develop a mindfulness habit. But turning that in to physical change in our brain involves repeat practice. So that idea that the brain builds the mind can freak some people out. It's like, well, what am I then? You are your brain and your mind. Your brain does everything. So decides to move your hand, decides to go for a walk, decides to do the maths, and that decision pops into your mind milliseconds later. So we're both things. We're the brain and the mind. But the mind is flexible only on the basis of what we've managed to get changed in our brain. So we can generate new concepts in our mind all of the time. But if we're going to make those concepts into daily actions, we're going to need to repeat behaviors. So why is it important to know all these intimate details about ourselves when we're thinking about habit change? Because basically, the neural global workspace helps us change our mind and build those arguments for change, but it's only repeat habits and actions that will build that into the brain, which means that the thoughts that enact that habit carve that structure, strengthen that structure, and enable us to move to a place where it's virtually automatic. So how do we do that? Let's take that example from that student. They want to build a mindfulness habit, and they're aware of all the evidence. They've got very strong arguments for change, and they've been thinking about it for ages. But what they haven't done is book an appointment with themselves to build that structure, that new skill, into the physical architecture of their brain. Remember, we're living in a neurally plastic brain that changes on the basis of what we use it for. So if we want to change our brain, we're going to need to do something different. As well as think it, we're going to need to do it. And the doing comes about by booking an appointment with ourselves, a time and a place when we're going to carry out that new habit. So I'm going to do mindfulness in the bedroom, 7:30, just after I've woken up, every day for 10 minutes. I'm going to use an app or a free YouTube mindfulness kind of meditation to follow. And you just do that every day for 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks. You tell other people you're going to do it. You maybe get a friend to nudge you in order to remind you to do it. And then it's not until you've done 5 or 6 or 7 weeks of that repeat action in the same place at the same time that you could possibly stretch and optimize that habit. You know, join a mindfulness meditation club, develop longer mindfulness sessions at the weekends, go on a retreat. All of those things flow from building the habit in the first place. And that is about booking an appointment with ourselves. I think one of the biggest problems we face is we are too ambitious. We've got thousands of thoughts flowing around our head. We can really only change 2 or 3 aspects of ourselves at a time because we've got to build those structures into our brain. So the daily life experiment in relation to this question is choose a new habit you want to build into your brain by writing down the arguments for change. So all the reasons why that you want to carry out that new habit, and then following that ACTS model. So making yourself aware, the arguments of change, choosing the time and the place that you're going to enact that habit. Try repeatedly to do that every day. You may fail a few times, but just pick yourself up, dust yourself off and have another go. And then once that's in your head, you can stretch the habit. And massive thank you to that sixth form student for that question. In that moment of frustration, it was really illuminating to be able to explore that answer for all of you. Take care, everyone. See you next week.